When a millionaire yelled at a black waitress, her incredible response left 100 diners in awe. The restaurant buzzed with energy, laughter bubbling alongside clinking glasses as Emma weaved through the crowded tables, a determined smile lighting her eyes. This was her world, vibrant and chaotic, an electric heartbeat of downtown Atlanta. Yet beneath her spirited exterior lurked shadows of unrelenting responsibility. At just 24, she juggled multiple jobs to support her single mother, who'd been thrust into the role of both parent and protector after they lost Emma's father suddenly. With each plate served, she felt a weight, a silent tribute to the man whose hard work was woven into every dollar she earned. She pushed aside her fears, focusing instead on the laughter and warmth surrounding her, but tonight felt different. A familiar tension rose as the clock struck 7. That was when Mr. Carlton stormed in, the business mogul who wielded wealth like a sword. His voice rolled through the restaurant, booming and arrogant as he scrutinized the staff with disdain. When he snapped at Emma, his words cut deeper than any knife. His seafood order, he declared, was wrong. The entire dining room froze, forks halted mid-bite while patrons feigned nonchalance, only to lean in, captivated by the unfolding drama. Emma's stomach twisted into knots. She knew the stakes. The customers' complaints could shatter her already fragile confidence. She felt the suffocating weight of the room's gaze, judgment and hesitation mingling in the air as he berated her for something so small, turning the error into a public spectacle. An ugly truth resonated: the power he held over her was immense. Yet she fought, not for herself alone but for the dreams she harbored for her mother. Breathe, just breathe, Emma reminded herself. Inside, emotions roared. Anguish and determination twisted within her, threatening to churn into resentment. Why had her father's death placed this burden on her? Each day stretched out like an unbearable marathon, struggling to keep her head above water. She clenched her fists, fought the urge to crawl back into her doubts. A voice in her head whispered that snapping back would only bring disaster. Instead, she took a deep breath, the warmth of the restaurant turning cold as her heart pounded in response to the looming confrontation. As she stood rooted to the spot, the chatter around them faded. Emma began to speak, her voice soft yet steady. She spoke of long nights spent balancing work and study, of the laughter with her mother on easier days, and daring dreams woven in the shadows of hardship. Would hearing her truth spark sympathy among the diners, or would they just roll their eyes? Deep down, she felt a flicker of hope, battling against a tide of fear that threatened to pull her under. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, as her words filled the air, echoing with a sincere vulnerability that shocked even her, the world around her began to shift. Heads turned, eyes softened, some diners began whispering amongst themselves questions about respect and the dignity of work, mere waitressing versus the impulse to dismiss others based on status. But just as momentum seemed to sway in her favor, the restaurant manager stepped in, wearing apprehension on his face. Time stretched, the pulse of the room quickened, the diners leaning in. Was Emma about to tip the scale toward acceptance, or would the mighty Carlton wield his weight again to silence her? With her heart racing, she opened her mouth, locking eyes with the audience. She felt the walls closing in, familiar anxiety tightening around her throat. This juncture might shape her life forever. Emma's next words loomed, potent and electric, suspended in the air, waiting to unleash or extinguish the embers of empathy birthed by her brief moment of truth. Would this fragile moment of solidarity hold, or crumble like a house of cards? The tension throbbed, each second stretching taut as a bowstring, begging for release. As Emma stood on the precipice of her own truth, she felt an unexpected surge of strength. The silence clung to her like heavy fog, wrapping around her words as she began to address the crowd. I understand the expectation for perfection, she said, her voice gaining momentum. But sometimes, life throws us challenges that we must face together. In that moment, she chose to rise above, not just for herself but for everyone who had felt the sting of being belittled or dismissed. She could sense the shifting energy surrounding her. Patrons exchanged glances, and for the first time, she saw nods of understanding rather than the condescension that usually met her gaze. Demar. Carlton, his expression stiffening, attempted to interrupt. "That's not how business is conducted," he barked, his confidence shaken but still defiantly anchored in his wealth. But before he could continue, Emma pressed on. "It's easy to forget that everyone has a story. We're not just servers, we're people each with our struggles, dreams, and dignity." With those words, she noticed her heart racing less from fear and more from the empowerment of voicing her reality. Today wasn't just about rectifying an order, it was about reclaiming her narrative, a moment to assert her worth amidst the cacophony of power dynamics. As she glanced around the restaurant, she saw empathy flickering in the eyes of her fellow workers, and even a few diners began to applaud. The sound was soft at first, but it built, creating a rhythm of validation that echoed within her, yet the applause was laced with tension as Mr. Carlton's face turned crimson with indignation. "You think this is a game? You are here to serve me," he retorted, but there was a quiver in his voice now, a crack in his public persona that made Emma realize she had found a chink in his armor. Her truth had pierced through, shocking both him and herself. There was a heavy moment, the kind when realization settles in. For too long, Emma had reserved her voice, believing patronizing words were the only language of power. She saw it now, not as an insult to her dignity but as a challenge to define it. Would she let the disdain of a single person derail her strength? Absolutely not. She had come too far. As the cheers mingled with the tension, she leaned into the moment. "I'm not here to beg for your approval," Emma declared, a newfound fire igniting within her. "I will not allow your money or status to minimize my worth or how we should treat each other." In that instant, she saw herself differently, the weight of responsibility shifting into a badge of honor rather than a burden. The applause grew louder, sweeping through the space with a warmth she had never felt before. There was something intoxicating about breaking the chains that shackled her to silence. She felt alive, aware of her growth in the face of adversity. Yet even as she relished this taste of empowerment, she knew the battle was far from over. Just then, the manager stepped forward, his hesitation evident. "Mr. Carlton, perhaps we should," he began, but the mogul cut him off with a wave of his hand, his face contorting into a mask of fury. This moment was transforming from a personal victory to a potential professional catastrophe, and as the applause began to dwindle, she perceived the uncertainty reflected in the employees around her. What would happen next? Would the world that had just begun to change for her suddenly snap back to its old ways? Emma felt the weight of that question as the atmosphere shifted once more. Standing at the heart of it all, she confronted the reality that she would have to fortify her stance not only for herself but for those who dared to dream bigger than the constraints cast upon them. An unexpected next step hung palpably in the air. Clenching her fists, she made a silent vow: she would take this momentum and fuse it into a new career path. This was her moment to master the art of not just serving but leading. But before she could strategize her next move, Mr. Carlton's furious gaze turned upon her once more. "You'll regret this," he hissed, and with those words, the narrative of their confrontation shifted yet again. Emma could sense the tide turning, tumultuous waves gathering just behind the surface. It was time for action. Would she fold under the pressure, or would she embrace the fear and prove that the power to dictate her life lay within her grasp? Emma's heart thundered, and the stage was set for a confrontation that could redefine not only her career but also the very essence of her identity. The room pulsated with an electric energy that felt almost tangible. Emma could hear the thumping of her heart echoing in her ears, each beat a reminder that she stood at a crossroads. Mr. Carlton's eyes were two smoldering coals, full of contempt and threats, but she refused to let that flicker of fear extinguish the brightness she had just ignited within herself. "Regret?" she repeated, her voice steady and measured. "Regretting for what? Speaking the truth? I'd rather stand in the light of honesty than cower in the shadow of your deceitful power." Surprises rippled through the gathering as patrons shifted uncomfortably, unprepared for a confrontation that had transcended the ordinary bounds of service industry decorum. She took a breath, anchoring herself in the moment, recalling the struggles she had endured and the silent battles fought on a daily basis. Each memory sculpted her resilience, a mosaic of indignities faced yet not forgotten. That kaleidoscope of emotions fired her up, and suddenly, she wasn't just a waitress, she was a force to be reckoned with. The applause from moments before rang in her ears, a symphony of alliance ringing true. With renewed confidence, she began to plot her strategy, a way to transform an impulsive stand into a calculated assertion of her value. This was not merely a singular event, it was a door opening to new horizons, her first steps towards something monumental. As the murmurs in the restaurant grew more pronounced, Emma switched her focus to her colleagues standing silently in the background. They too faced the indignities and microaggressions of everyday interactions. Their eyes flitted from her to Mr. Carlton, wide with expectation but marred by uncertainty. Emma understood, perhaps better than ever, the need for collective strength. She realized she could either keep this moment to herself or galvanize the very people around her to seize their own voices. "Mr. Carlton," she said, addressing him pointedly, drawing on the strength of the crowd, "your threats only serve to highlight your own insecurities. But look around, there are people here who work, who strive, and who deserve better than the dismissals you've slung their way. Your money and status mean nothing if you cannot respect the worth of another person." The kitchen began to fill with murmurs of agreement among her co-workers who had been inspired to stand alongside her. Yet with each word she spoke, she sensed a shift in the air, a visible stirring of defiance. And yet, she also felt an unsettling trepidation rise around her. Was she stepping too far, too fast? She mentally paused, weighing the consequences of her brazen determination, knowing too well the risks associated with crossing someone like Mr. Carlton, but that hesitation was quickly overtaken by the urgency to act. This was about more than just herself, it was about breaking the chains of unspoken expectations that bound them all. If we've learned anything here today, it's that true excellence comes not from subservience but from validation and respect for one another. At that moment, a crackling clarity surged through her. She had unearthed something profound within herself. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was an awakening. The timbre of her voice grew stronger, fueled by the collective shared experience of those standing in solidarity. This would not be the end, it marked the beginning of a much greater journey. As Mr. Carlton sneered, the tension became palpable. His demeanor shifted, a man at the precipice of losing control, while Emma felt the thrill of gaining it. Would this be her moment of liberation or her ultimate undoing? The stakes had never been higher. In an unexpected twist, Emma opened her mouth to deliver a final declaration, her heart racing with revelation. If you truly wish to see who deserves regret, observe the depth of someone without power. The room held its breath in anticipation, and she knew this confrontation was laying the groundwork for something much more than just a fleeting instance of defiance. What lay ahead would test her newfound strength, and she realized that this struggle was just the beginning. As she locked eyes with Mr. Carlton once more, a flurry of thoughts raced through her mind. The next steps would either solidify her ascent or plunge her back into obscurity. What would she choose? The tension in the room thickened, the air punctuated by the weight of unexpressed thoughts and looming consequences. Emma had cast a stone into the stagnant water, but how strong would the ripples be? She felt an unfamiliar power coursing through her veins, a blend of adrenaline and resolve. This was no longer merely about confronting Mr. Carlton, it was a fight for recognition, her voice resonating not just with her own fears, but also those of everyone within that confined space. As Mr. Carlton's face twisted in anger, Emma felt the heat rise within her, urging her not to relent. Perhaps this was the moment she had been waiting for, an opportunity to unwrap the layers of vulnerability she had tightly wound around herself for years. No longer would she cling to the notion that her status as a waitress defined her existence. She could climb higher, she had to. "You think power is everything, don't you?" she declared, her voice unwavering, defiance painting her words. "But power without respect is a fragile facade." The murmurs of agreement grew in the crowd again, wrapping around her like a protective cloak. There was relief in knowing she wasn't alone in her feelings and fears, and this newfound solidarity sharpened her focus and more. Carlton shifted his weight, visibly rattled. This was her chance. With every passing second, Emma wrestled with what to do next. The energy in the room pulsed with anticipation, yet her mind raced with potential consequences. Would Mr. Carlton retaliate? Would she land herself in more trouble than she could handle? But then came a realization: she was already in the thick of it. Fearing the storm meant losing the fight before it began. An image of her colleagues flashed through her mind, their downturned eyes, their clenched fists, echoes of their own struggles. The very fact she was standing up caused some of them to hold their breath, hoping for change yet fearing the risks associated. That palpitating hope turned into a guiding light. Instead of retreating, she advanced mentally, recalibrating her thoughts. You'll find that strength does not solely derive from wealth, Mr. Carlton. It resides in people who know their worth. Emma stepped closer, her heart racing but her demeanor steady, confronting the man whose arrogance fueled a lifetime of disdain for her and others like her. No amount of money can compensate for the disservice done to a person's dignity. As she spoke, she processed the surreal nature of her own boldness. She was living her truth, challenging not just an individual, but a system designed to keep her in a place of subservience. The idea that she could shape her future with audacity didn't just electrify her, it empowered her to think strategically. In that moment, Emma planned her next steps. It wasn't enough to merely confront Mr. Carlton. She needed to harness this energy and translate it into actions that could echo beyond this confined space. She envisioned pathways beyond the restaurant walls, ways to uplift her colleagues, create a supportive environment, and dismantle the fears that chained them all. But would that mean stepping further into the unknown, risking everything for a vision that could be as fragile as the moment they stood in? Each heartbeat pulsed with urgency, pulling her deeper into the reality swirling around her. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a fleeting thought of victory for the first time in years. And then, through the din of murmurs, she blurted the simplest, yet most significant, question: what are we willing to lose in order to gain what we truly deserve? The words hung in the air, an invitation but also a challenge. In that split second, she realized that her internal struggle was merely a reflection of the fight everyone else faced. And as Mr. Carlton's brow furrowed deeper, she understood that by taking this leap, she had sparked not only her own transformation but also a potential reckoning for all who gathered there. But could she manage the fallout from this bold stand, and what would it mean for her future? That uncertainty crackled beneath the surface like a live wire, igniting a different kind of anticipation, one that would demand her unwavering resolve. Emma's pulse quickened. The next move would define not just her narrative, but potentially impact everyone present. What awaited her on the path illuminated by her newfound voice? Emma could feel the weight of the crowd behind her, a collective heartbeat interwoven with her own. The room vibrated with unresolved tension as all eyes turned to Mr. Carlton. For a moment, time suspended, and the fate of this confrontation hung in the balance. The air crackled, pregnant with possibility, and she tightened her grip around the metaphorical reins of her destiny. "Speak," he growled, yet the tremor underneath that bravado suggested he was unaccustomed to such direct challenge. Emma almost felt pity, a wounded animal, cornered and growling, unable to see that its roar was less a display of strength than a reflection of its vulnerability. "I'm tired of waiting for change to trickle down from the top, Mr. Carlton," she pressed, her voice cutting through the murmurings. "Real power lies in challenging the status quo, not in maintaining it." Each word was deliberate. She was no longer fighting just for herself but for the silent voices bowing beneath their burdens. The audience erupted into whispers, a tangible energy shifting the room. Kindred spirits resonated with her words, feeding off her courage, while a knot of defiance twisted in Emma's stomach. Deep inside, her doubts churned. What if she was speaking into the void? What if this moment backfired, sparking retribution that would silence her and everyone around her? But doubt soon transformed into determination. Emma's earlier visions of pathways beyond the restaurant walls now crystallized into a clear focus. She envisioned meetings at the break room table, strategies crafted over flickering fluorescent lights, a collective push for change. Her voice could ignite a revolution of sorts, a movement among her colleagues incited not just by frustration but by newfound courage. Why do we let fear drown our ambition? She continued, pacing slightly as she spoke. What if we demand better pay, better respect? We deserve it as much as anyone who sits in the corner office. The murmurs grew louder, a groundswell of support rallying around her. Around the edges of her vision, she could spot nods of agreement, sparks igniting in familiar faces. Mr. Carlton's veneer of calm was cracking, his arrogance under siege. There was a new intensity in the room, a shared realization that they were on the brink of something profound. Emma suppressed the urge to retreat into the shadows. She was pushing boundaries now, confronting not just the man but the entire system. Are we willing to risk a little discomfort to gain our dignity? Emma posed, her breath quickening. Yes, it's a gamble. But isn't this worth the risk? Emma could feel every heartbeat, the anticipation building as she locked eyes with her colleagues. Could she really mobilize them? They were like her, yearning for release from chains unseen. As her adrenaline surged, Emma's thoughts flickered to the next step. How would she build a coalition? Perhaps they could collaborate on a petition outlining their demands, bring it to administration, share it with the press. The possibilities began to unfurl, murmuring like the current of a steady stream. Carlton's face turned a shade darker, and Emma knew the warning signs were apparent. He might try to dismantle her moment with rage, or worse, silence the truth she had gathered others to recognize. Yet, in his eyes, she glimpsed something else, a flicker of doubt. Had he underestimated her? More importantly, had he underestimated the collective spirit of the people he sought to belittle? The silence was palpable. Emma noticed the challenges lining the path ahead, but those uncertainties were eclipsed by shimmering embers of hope. Whether it would be resistance from him or encouragement from her allies, she was no longer captive to her own fears. What happens now? She thought fiercely, as she prepared for whatever storm might follow. Her heart drumming, she squared her shoulders, drawing strength from every gaze fixed upon her. She was ready to confront the next big hurdle, a realization dawning on her that the battle wasn't just against Mr. Carlton, it was against the very doubts embedded in her mind. With resolve ignited, Emma leaned in, ready to push further into uncharted territory. Every journey begins with a single step. Are you with me? What awaited her on the road of defiance? How far would she have to push before the truth could overpower intimidation? Emma felt a surge of defiance coursing through her veins, as if each word she had just uttered ignited a fire not only in her heart but in the hearts of those around her. The room was a cauldron of anticipation, she could almost taste the potential for change on the tipping point of her tongue. It was clear she had struck a nerve. Carlton's challenge, instead of silencing her, had stripped away any remnants of her earlier hesitation. She wasn't just a waitress now, she was a catalyst. But what would that mean for her future? Would her courage draw admiration or wrath? The stakes were higher than she'd ever anticipated. As her colleagues began murmuring, encouragement crept into the whispers, phrases of solidarity and agreement flickered across their faces like lightning breaking through the clouds. Each nod felt like fuel added to her resolve, and Emma knew she couldn't back down now. Fear transformed into a calculated energy, and she made a mental note to harness it, to give it shape and direction. What comes next? She pondered, imagining her plan unfolding. There had to be structure beneath the current of emotion. Collectivity didn't mean chaos, it meant organization, strategy, and mutual support. She could already see the get-togethers at the break room table. They would build a structure, brainstorm a list of demands. Emma envisioned her colleagues laying out their daily struggles, each story a thread in a fabric of evidence that could no longer be ignored. She began to see a vision, a poster adorned with bold letters, a petition spearheaded by her insights. Would the local press even take notice? A deep breath steadied her thoughts. But the clock was ticking, the moment for action was now. She had to seize this momentum before it faded into mere nostalgia. "We need a plan," she said, still focused on the collective energy humming in the atmosphere. "A petition outlining our needs and experiences can amplify our voices." A few colleagues leaned forward, intrigue lighting their eyes. Emma's mind raced through the logistics: how to gather signatures, where to share their story, how to communicate their demands. Each thought brought forth a mix of excitement and anxiety, balancing on the edge of what felt right and what felt like a leap into darkness. "Signatures can build this movement," she offered with newfound strength, laying out the steps in crisp clarity. "We reach out to local media, raise awareness about our issues, show them it's not just about us, but about everyone who shares the struggle." The palpable tension in the room shifted. It was no longer Emma versus Mr. Carlton, but Emma and her peers drafting a manifesto for change. Yet, the gnawing of doubt remained. Would the higher-ups listen? Would Mr. Carlton retaliate? Opening this door could subject her to scrutiny she had long sought to escape. Shivers of uncertainty danced down her spine, but she fought against it. Every risk carries the possibility of reward, she reminded herself. This is what I signed up for. Yet as she looked around, she saw anxious faces mirroring her own inner turbulence. The urge to appease those anxieties urged her to complicate the next steps. But Emma reminded herself, clarity nurtures confidence. They needed resolution, not a convoluted path that could confuse or deter. "Will you stand with me?" she repeated, the fiery light in her heart intensifying. As the heads nodded in agreement, some hesitantly, some resolutely, her attention drifted back to Mr. Carlton. His expression was a tempest, shifting between disbelief and fury. It became clear to her that regardless of how he responded, she was not prepared to be a victim anymore. What would he do next? She thought sharply. Could he silence them, or was it too late? Emma took a step forward, driven by determination and marked by the realization of her own power. The questions loomed large, but beneath the uncertainty lay an exhilarating sense of possibility. As the weight of her words hung in the air, she sensed that they had crossed a threshold. What Emma could not yet see was how profoundly this moment would pivot the arc of her journey, but she could feel the uncharted territory beckoning her forward. The path of defiance had begun, and every heartbeat echoed the question that would shape her future: would it be enough? Emma braced herself for both victory and the storms that lay ahead, fully aware that this was just the beginning. As the room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, Emma's heart raced not only from the adrenaline of the moment but also from the weight of what was about to unfold. She shifted her gaze around the table, searching for signs of fear or doubt, but the encouragement was palpable. Her colleagues were now allies. They were ready to create the change that urgency demanded, but how could she navigate the churning waters that lay ahead? Gripping the edge of the table, Emma dug her nails into the wood for focus. Each pulse in her fingers reminded her of the stakes she was facing. It dawned on her that this wouldn't just impact their working conditions, it had the potential to redefine her identity within this space. Was she prepared to embrace it? Emma felt the pressure of expectation not just from her colleagues who had rallied around her, but from herself. She had tasted the power of vocalization and resolved to bolster that with a tangible impact. She envisioned sleepless nights spent combing through labor laws, about strategizing petitions and figuring out whom to approach at local newspapers. This could either elevate her from the limits of servitude she had known for so long, or it could extinguish her spirit entirely if met with resistance. "Let us call a meeting tomorrow," she proposed, her mind racing with logistics. "We brainstorm our experiences, emphasize our needs, and draft the petition. The stronger our message, the more likely it is to resonate with others outside these walls." Hope flickered as others turned to one another, confirming they were willing to participate. With each passing moment, a clearer picture of their shared mission unfolded in her mind, and yet, shadows of doubt continued to loom. It seemed inevitable that Mr. Carlton would retaliate, glaring at them from his lofty position. Emma could almost hear the derision in his voice, dismissing their voices as irrelevant commoners. Determined to quell her unease, she forced herself to adopt a mindset of learning. What experiences had shaped Mr. Carlton that made him see them merely as cogs in the machine? How would she confront him if he hurled insults or undermined their efforts? She wanted to arm herself not just with words, but with understanding. It was becoming clear that personal growth was interwoven with this process after all. She had to evolve, adapt, and strategize effectively to win respect, yet the emotional toll weighed heavily. Emma felt the tug of her temper. She had a fiery spirit hidden beneath layers of acquiescence, but where did it fit in this moment? Would her anger cloud her judgment or fuel a forthright confrontation? She had to find the balance, breathe purpose into her indignation without succumbing to reckless impulse. When their gathering broke up, each colleague departed with echoes of Emma's fervor. Hope buoyed the air. Clutching her notepad filled with notes of ideas, she walked home slowly, mulling over every resonance of the evening. Would they truly mobilize? Would she bravely confront Mr. Carlton if it came to that? Upon entering her apartment, she stood before the mirror and examined her reflection, searching for the burgeoning leader within. The unseen fractures of doubt were there, but they were accompanied by a newfound sense of responsibility. This was her moment, not only for her but for everyone she had left at the mercy of the system. As she lay in bed that night, the image of a powerful collective action ignited her imagination. But was she truly brave enough to embody the change she longed to see? Tomorrow's meeting would mark a pivotal turning point, a crossroads where courage would either blossom or falter, defining her trajectory into the unknown. With thoughts racing, she clenched her fists tightly, grounding herself in determination while allowing uncertainty to flutter just beneath the surface. She could feel the approach of a storm, and despite the fear, it ignited excitement within her heart. What will tomorrow hold? She wondered, a question bubbling with intensity, foreshadowing both the burdens and boons of her choices yet to come. The time had come for her to face the tumult ahead and discover if she could truly stand her ground against the tides of power. Morning light spilled through the slats in Emma's blinds, illuminating the remnants of her restless night. As she stirred awake, the weight of her commitment felt heavier. Yesterday's fervor now coalesced into a simmering anxiety spiraling around her core. She glanced at her watch, the digits blinking back at her with urgency. Time was slipping away, yet her mind was a tumultuous sea of uncertainty. Every task she had envisioned for the day crowding into her thoughts. Who would speak up first? Would they present their stories honestly? Would Mr. Carlton's typical disdain stifle their momentum? The nagging fear of inadequacy clawed at her confidence. Had she truly prepared herself for such a confrontation? In stark contrast, at that moment, her resolve began to crystallize. She allowed herself to recall the words she had spoken to her colleagues only hours earlier, a blend of passion and persistence that transformed her hesitations into a mission. Emma pushed against the deep-seated anxiety, telling herself that today required her to shed the layers of old vestiges and emergent fears. As she dressed, she considered the significance of appearance. Would a bold outfit communicate strength, or would it become another facade to hide behind? Opting for confidence, she pulled on a crisp white blouse and dark slacks that felt both professional and empowering. Standing tall gave her a sense of authority over her own image, a foundation to build upon when confronting the obstacles ahead. The commute to work transformed into an impromptu self-affirmation session. Each stride resonated with purpose as she visualized stepping into the meeting room, commanding the attention belonging to someone whose voice mattered. Questions bubbled to the surface, gnawing at her thoughts. What if she stumbled through her presentation? What if they were met with resistance? At the office, she felt a rush of adrenaline as she entered the conference room, where a sense of anticipation thrummed in the air. Her colleagues were already gathered, their faces, a tapestry of resolution and trepidation, mirrored her own inner conflict. Would they trust her to lead them today? Emma inhaled deeply, drawing in courage before speaking. Thank you all for coming today. I know we all have concerns, but we must find our voices together. A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the group, her leader-like posture garnering a flicker of hope across the room. Emma began to facilitate, establishing an open environment for sharing, revealing personal anecdotes and struggles that illuminated their collective plight. As each voice emerged, the tapestry interwoven with their stories began to illuminate their purpose. She noticed an older coworker wipe away tears as he described feeling abandoned by the hierarchy, another shared how daily indignities had become the norm. Each testimony added weight to their gathering momentum and eventually stoked the embers of her own determination. The shadows of self-doubt lost their grip as she found synergy with the narrative each colleague expressed. In that moment, she understood the gravity of what they were undertaking together. Her personal growth transcended her initial fears as each word became a pivotal ally in crafting their message of resistance. As they drafted the petition with fervor and collaboration, a sudden realization dawned on Emma: this gathering marked not just a commitment to change their workplace, but a profound transformation brewing within her. She discovered hidden reservoirs of strength that lay dormant beneath her previous passivity. With every idea that sparked in the room, she felt a piece of her old self recede, blossoming into someone who truly could confront the tides of power. However, the looming presence of Mr. Carlton remained an ever-constant specter, unsettling possibilities tinged with dread. What would he say? What lengths would he go to in order to maintain control? And as if on cue, her phone chimed with a message, a notification that unfurled a new layer of tension. A meeting was scheduled with him later that afternoon. She needed to prepare, to fortify not only her arguments but herself, for a battle that felt increasingly inevitable. New questions stirred in Emma's mind, racing alongside the palpable tension building within her. What sort of opposition would she face? Would she finally confront him in defiance of her past patterns? The storm was brewing, and she was now at its center. Emma's heart raced as she settled into her chair, the afternoon sun bathing her in a warm guise, contrasting sharply with the chill of her apprehension. She had just emerged victorious from their earlier meeting, feeling invincible in collaboration, yet the imminent confrontation with Mr. Carlton loomed like a thundercloud, darkening her brightened spirit. His looming presence overshadowed her burgeoning confidence, twisting it into knots of uncertainty. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second echoing louder than the last. A part of her wished to retreat. The echoes of self-doubt threatened to drown out the newfound self-assuredness. But the memory of her colleagues' shared experiences, their vulnerabilities encapsulated in the words spoken that morning, anchored her. They were counting on her, they had entrusted her with this fight. Inhaling sharply, Emma opened her laptop, determined to fortify her argument with data statistics that would lay bare the disparity and discontent threading through their workplace. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingertips, and as she typed, each piece of information transformed her anxiety into resolve. Beyond mere numbers, she formulated a narrative that put faces to these figures, each a story echoing the need for change. Finally, the time came. The door handle rattled, a sound that felt like a bell tolling a final judgment. Mr. Carlton entered the room, imposing and arrogant, with an air of authority that momentarily halted her breath. His gaze swept over her, calculating and dismissive. He settled into his seat, the tension laden in silence. Emma struggled against the urge to diminish herself under his scrutiny. "Let us cut to the chase, shall we?" he said, his voice smooth yet loaded with an undercurrent of contempt. "I hear there are rumblings in the office. People claiming they deserve more recognition and respect. It seems unfounded." His words sliced through her preparation, coiling her stomach with dread. Yet as she made eye contact with him, Emma felt a flicker of defiance spark within. She had prepared for this moment. Wasn't he going to let his disdain dictate the course of her response? "Respect isn't unfounded, Mr. Carlton. It's earned, and right now, we don't feel seen. Our contributions are dismissed, our voices silenced." With each syllable, her voice steadied, and the seconds of stilted silence felt less like confrontation and more like a negotiation. She wasn't just defending her colleagues, she was advocating for herself. "I've gathered testimonies. Real people with real stories," she continued, her pulse quickening with resolve. "We can't let embarrassment or fear hold us back any longer. We're asking for consideration to remain or improve our conditions at work. We want to be valued, not just by the numbers we produce. We are human beings." Mr. Carlton's expression hardened, his brow furrowing as he leaned back in his chair. The battle lines were drawn. Emma sensed the shift in power dynamics. She was no longer hiding behind her insecurities. She had stepped into her strength, but then, something unexpected flickered in his eyes. Was it anger, indignation? Or perhaps, deep underneath it, a flicker of understanding? Emma sensed the conflict beneath his stern facade. It was a moment of vulnerability and opportunity, and it was hers to seize. "Does this mean you agree, or do you plan to ignore what I'm saying?" She pressed, the words spilling forth. It was a gamble, she knew it. But having finally stepped into her power, she realized now was not the time to back down. As she stood on the precipice of confrontation, the stakes rose terrifyingly high. Would Mr. Carlton lash out, retaliate with contempt? Or might he honor the will she and her colleagues were displaying? The weight of uncertainty settled in the air, and Emma braced herself for whatever would come next. This wouldn't just be about today or a single petition, it was about redefining her place in this workplace and, possibly, in her own narrative. "Let us discuss how to move forward," he finally replied, his tone tentative but unwilling to concede completely. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she realized this could signal a shift in their relationship. But would it lead to change? The battle was far from over, and she could feel another storm brewing on the horizon. How much of her newfound courage could she maintain, and at what cost? The endgame of this encounter was murky, but one thing was increasingly clear: as Emma clung to her resolve, the lines between fear and defiance were beginning to blur, and she was no longer just a participant in her own life, she was becoming the architect of her own destiny. What would be her next move, and would her voice hold steadfast, even against his storm? As Emma confronted Mr. Carlton, the once intimidating figure seemed less formidable than before. His dismissive demeanor had unraveled. Now, he faced not a waitress fighting for crumbs but a formidable woman, reshaped by her journey and ready to assert her worth. "You want to talk about moving forward?" she echoed, her voice steady, her resolve crystallizing. "Then let us discuss the very real situations we're confronted with every day, instead of glossing over them." Emma had not only prepared data but also gathered palpable anecdotes, her colleagues' experiences spoken with the weight of their realities. Each testimony resonated, forming a mosaic of shared struggles that stirred raw emotions. "We're not just looking for pay increases or more shifts. We seek recognition and respect," she stated boldly, the energy in the room humming with anticipation. She felt renewed confidence surging within her, illuminating the path ahead. Carlton shifted in his chair, visibly unsettled. "I'm not saying your concerns are invalid. But the way you all approached this just isn't how business is done." His words hung in the air, dismissive yet revealing a hint of understanding he hadn't anticipated in Emma. He was realizing that the dynamics of power were shifting. "Understand this, Mr. Carlton," Emma replied, leaning forward. "You often speak of business like it's a game of chess, where pieces are expendable. But we're people, not pawns. The game can't continue at the expense of our dignity." A flicker of surprise danced across his face, quickly extinguished by irritation, yet Emma pressed on. "This isn't just about today's frustration, it's a long-standing issue that reflects poorly on the values you claim to uphold. Would you be content if your own hard work were minimized?" "Think about it," she challenged, maintaining eye contact, her heart racing with the weight of those words. A tense silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the ticking clock as Emma felt the potential for change solidifying in the air. Perhaps for the first time, Carlton was reflecting on the implications of his authority. There was a moment where the power dynamic hung in delicate balance. "Fine," he relented gruffly, "we'll review your petition. But don't expect any favorable outcomes." Emma felt a rush of victory coursing through her veins. It wasn't a grand triumph, but it was a step transcendently significant. She spoke in her mind, challenged authority, and earned a semblance of recognition. In that space, she felt the ascent, a moment of personal achievement marked by the courage she had mustered to advocate for herself and her colleagues. As their meeting wrapped, a new chapter unfolded. The anticipation of their petition being reviewed was laden with hope, but uncertainty lingered in their success. Yet Emma stood firmer, courage rooted in the knowledge that she had found her voice. It was no longer just a matter of demanding respect, it was about embedding resilience into her identity. She was no longer merely surviving, she was advancing. Her colleagues, upon her exit from the meeting, awaited the news with expectant expressions. When Emma revealed the meeting's outcomes, empowerment infused each response around her, a spark igniting in their collective hopes. They felt buoyed by her audacity, and she recognized the incredible strength blossoming among them. A supervisor approached Emma later that day, a figure she had previously harbored trepidation toward, and offered her a hand in the kitchen, guiding her to a quieter corner. "What you said today was powerful," he confessed, his tone sincere. "You showed everyone that the standards we uphold matter. We're with you." Those words cemented her transformation, validating her belief that even in the midst of chaos, growth could thrive. Emma felt a profound sense of confidence surging within her. No longer trapped in the shadows, she had stepped into the light, embodying a path that promised not only recognition but empowerment for all. For days afterward, she fostered collaborative discussions among her co-workers about their experiences, establishing a stronger sense of unity and network full of voices, where once there had been individual struggles. Emma had conquered not only her fears but had become a conduit of hope, ready to shape a brighter future for herself and her community. At work, in her heart, she now carried tangible proof. She was more than what job titles defined or what setbacks had attempted to restrain. She had proven to herself and to the world that transformation begins from within, and through this personal growth, she had achieved a professional milestone that would ripple outward, and as the electricity of that change spread, Emma felt certain it was just the beginning. Empowered and invigorated, she stepped forward into her own future, no longer tethered to fear or defeat, but emboldened by the courage she had unearthed. This was her awakening. Her journey was far from finished, but she had firmly claimed her place, determined to mold her destiny. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover these incredible transformations. Share your reactions and theories about this ending in the comments, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful resolution. Your support is crucial, and only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.